Gilda Frantz. The conversation that you're about to see took place with Hilde Kirsch and myself almost 13 years ago to the day. It was just before Hilde's 74th birthday. Hilde was doing a seminar at that time on Zarathustra, which Jung had given in Zurich many years before, and which I think she attended in Zurich. Many of us would gather at her home and enjoy her lunches, as well as the wonderful richness of the seminar, as Hilde was not only an analyst, but she was a very, very good cook and a wonderful hostess. Hilde's and my friendship went back many, many years because my late husband was an analyst, Gilda Frantz, and it was through him that I became interested and involved with Jungian psychology. So I knew Hilde as the wife of an analyst, and many years later I entered analysis with her. So not only did I know her as a friend and socially, she became my analyst, and eventually, because we were both analysts, she became my friend, even though there was a 25-year difference in our ages. Hilde was unique in many ways. She supported the Institute, the Jung Institute. She raised a family and was a wife and mother and in fact, a really spiritual mother to many people in Los Angeles. The conversation with Hilde took place in May of 1976.
I have often wondered what fate of mine it was to come across first James, because I got to Jung through James, and then to meet Jung. And the funny thing is that without Hitler, I don't think it would have happened.
That's rather hard to accept in a way.
Well, it doesn't make Hitler right or good, you see. But I think anything that happens, one can relate to in a way that it becomes important for you.
Well, I think it's good that you invited us into your home and that you opened yourself for this.
Well, I would only open myself for this for you. I would not do that for any other person. But I feel that I have gotten so much from him, so I really owe him everything I am, so I would do anything I can for him. And I am very concerned that Jung gets into the world when the older people who have really worked with him directly have passed away, that he really gets into the world the way he was and the way he wanted to, rather than with changes and modern ideas mixed in and so on.
When you say modern ideas, what do you mean by that?
Well, when I looked through my book, I came across something where he was talking about the silliness of the people, of people as such, and that they have to invent existentialism because they cannot really listen to the unconscious, and that they think that because they write books and give lectures, that way whatever is in the unconscious is coming into reality. And he calls it the dumbness of the people at that time. And that was 1953 or so when he was talking about it, where this just came into being. So I think to him nothing really mattered unless it was related to the soul or to the psyche or to the unconscious. And I did ask him, when he made that comment, always asked him, and what about you? You are writing books and you are giving lectures. And he always felt that was different, that what he had to say was from his inner experience and not just an intellectual, well, as he called it, garbage.
Garbage.
Mm-hmm.
Which implies a kind of unintegrated, undigested bunch of stuff.
Well, mainly that it didn't come up via any inner experience. That it was an intellectual. I think in dream symbol it comes up with the people who are acrobats. We call it always acrobatic intellect.
You mentioned before about Jung telling stories, or that sometimes 2 or 3 years would go by before the dime dropped. Do you remember any of that?
Well,
Could you share it?
The one thing that I took out was a dream 26 years ago, and to illustrate something, he told me a story which I immediately realized that it had to do with an ego attitude towards the dream. But it had nothing to do with the images of the dream. He brought completely new images into the story. And the dream was that I was on a boat on the ocean, and on that boat was a big audience. And we, and I don't know who we is, had to give a performance, or better, the necessity grew to express something. And the basis for what had to be expressed were the tablets that Moses received from God on the mountain of Sinai. These were very ancient rocks, and the Hebrew laws were hewed into them. My role was to announce the laws that were inscribed in the tablets. And therefore, I had to be dressed in black, and my face had to be concealed with a black veil. I resisted as much as I could and said, never yet has a Jewish woman done this. But the way the roles were distributed were like fate, and each person had to accept it. And I started very hesitantly. I think I said a prayer in Hebrew, which I don't know consciously, and did not recite the tablets. Next, I saw a man who looked like Jung. He also looked like Beethoven, with an almost unbearable expression of suffering on his face. And in his whole attitude, it was his fate to join the cast of this performance and to say something, and that's the end of the dream. And Jung's comment on the dream, incidentally, that's a dream that was working in me for years, and each time something new came up out of that. And actually, when I came back 3 years later and I asked Jung if that's a long time to kind of live with a dream, he remembered, of course, every word of the dream and said, oh, he thinks that's very short, in 3 years. Now, what he said is that woman is a great problem, and he meant for women and men. One has to live with her as man and as woman to be confronted with one's own femininity. And then he told a story. And the story was of a man, I think it is a Chinese legend, I'm not sure, who fell into a stream and he was pulled into a whirlpool, and then came out again further down. And on the question what he did, he explained he was had fallen into the stream, and he noticed that the whirlpool would not adjust to him, so he adjusted to the whirlpool. And meaning by that if he would have fought the whirlpool, he probably would have drowned, because he would have used all his energy to fight the whirlpool. Because he was able to give in, his life was saved, and he actually came out on a different place. And I had the feeling that he told me the story because I didn't want to accept what the unconscious told me, and so he gave that story. Then I spoke of my feeling of having an open wound in my stomach, and he said that it's like after a birth. And then he said the old laws are always unchanged, referring to the tablets. I can only announce them with the animus. The woman has to be veiled in the dark, has to be in the dark, to be unconscious. And it has to become a ritual, and this way the spiritual animus is being born. Jung, Beethoven, that's his analysis of the dream. Music and feeling, and the attitude is a servant of God or the servant of the selves, or one serves the divine. And then he talked about his own silliness. He was telling that too. And apparently what he was trying to say there was he had to be as old as he is to understand a dream like this and to really have the right attitude to it, touching the depths of the dream and the conflicts that are in it. And then at the end he said one of the biggest stupidities of mankind is the atom bomb. So that's the way he worked, you see, and not once did he say, you should, you shouldn't, or why don't you, or any of that. He just left it in the imagery of the dream, and yet gave it an enormous interpretation on that level. Now that's, I'm always told I am the one who can analyze archetypal dreams, as if archetypal dreams are very rarely, and as if the ordinary analyst doesn't have to do that. And I can analyze this dream very easily on a personal level, but you don't get the same. I'm sure I wouldn't have remembered it after 20 years.
This must have been after you had been in the United States.
See, yeah, this was in 1950. That was the first time I went back to Zurich after the war. Mm-hmm. So since 1937, that was the first time I came back.
I remember you said everything looked the same.
Yes.
in his
house mm-hmm. and office. He said it, not I.
I remember you told me.
Yeah, he said it.
Mm-hmm. How did he say that?
I was looking around. Actually, I was stroking a bookshelf as if I was meeting some good old acquaintance. And then he said, everything is the same, unchanged.
I was thinking this morning of a dream that I had when Jung died. I woke up, I didn't know that he had died, and the dream was that a bank of earth had dropped. I wondered how you felt at that time.
When Jung died?
When Jung died, on June the 6th.
It was a very strange feeling. If you would have asked me before he died, I would have thought life can't go on. And to my amazement, and I mean that's not only true for me, that's true for all the people in Zurich too, that when he actually died, we were of course all very sad. We were not shocked because we expected his death, and he was old and he had lived an unbelievable, great life and shared it. But I did, well, the dream that you are telling, where something is falling really a level deeper, I think that is what has happened more or less to all of us who were in contact with him. That something really became completely ours, which was, as long as he was alive, shared with him. And I still dream about Jung at times. I mean, he's a very vital figure in my unconscious, and I have lots of patients who dream about him. Remarkably, the way he was, even though they had never met him. And sometimes I feel good about this dream, that egocentric, and think, gee, I must have related him pretty good. And sometimes, of course, I realize it has nothing to do with me. So he is, in that sense, not dead. I think he's more alive than ever.
Jung once said that, and it's really paraphrasing it, about that there's a certain time during the period of individuation, toward the end of it, when one is very much alone.
Yes.
Do you feel that?
Well, you see, I feel that when he died, that's what he kind of did for all of us, who were very connected to him. And I don't think would have had just the individual strength not to try to go on with him all the way. And his death kind of forced all of us into that loneliness, because there was nobody else there who could take his place. And in all fairness to the analysts in Zurich, I mean, they are very good and very nice, but that last part you do go alone, and it's lonely. And I told the story once in James's seminar that my last interview, I told him a dream, and I realized, my God, that man is 85 years old, and it was pages of dream, and so I only told him half the dream, thinking I can't put that all on him. And so then he started. You know, he didn't ask you for one association, very seldom he did. He just started to talk. And I was kind of not making the connection which what he was talking about had anything to do with my dream, but I knew better that I will find the connection if I listen eventually. And suddenly he said, oh, that is as if you dream, and he told me the second part of my dream, which I hadn't told him. So I learned my lesson at that time. It really was as if he was always inside of your unconscious, and not trespassing, but because he has been wherever one was, and so he knew how to be safe.
Was it very hard for you living as a European to come to this country and be on American soil?
Well, I really think I shouldn't say live on American soil because I've only lived in Los Angeles. I really don't know what America is like. Otherwise, I've never lived in a small village or with people who are not chasing constantly by car all over the place. And I refuse to think that's America. I really feel that's Los Angeles. And Los Angeles was very difficult for me, yes. And I think it's probably difficult for any introvert who realizes that one is an introvert. And that I know when I come from Europe and I'm in a car, I sometimes stop right in the middle and say, now what am I chasing now to? Okay? And you simply get into that. You see, in Europe I will walk for hours, and here I don't walk to the letterbox half a block. I take the car. Don't know what that is.
Become an American.
I don't think that's American. I think it's Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. I refuse to believe that that's American.
How long did your family live in Germany?
My family lived in Germany since the 9th century. And actually it's a very unusual family tree for a Jewish family to have such a long staying in one country. But we have a family tree which is actually in the library in New York because it's so unusual. That goes back to the 9th century. So we are not coming, as most of the Jewish people come, from Poland or Russia or Spain or... and yet I was amazed. Once I left Germany, and we left from Germany for Palestine at that time, how fast I've forgotten anything German or how it was in Germany, and how at home I felt in Palestine immediately, without knowing the language. It was a completely different country, desert and hot and so on, and nothing mattered. Now, for me, Los Angeles was very hard, and I had innumerable dreams each time I was in Zurich. I should not go back to America. Now, I always had to take that on an inner level because I had to go back to America. Took me about 22 years till I felt I could be me here.
Do you worry about the future of Jungian psychology?
I worry about the future, yes. I am afraid that that the people don't have the same commitment anymore to the self. I mean, that's what Jung stands for to me, is a commitment to the self, whatever that is, in every individual. And it's a very painful process, and it asked for an awful lot of energy and feeling and love, and it's very hard to relate it to all the other things that are coming to you and from life, that you really are not losing your commitment and say, oh, well, there's a faster way of doing all that. And then I deceive myself in thinking that there is a faster way, and I don't think there is.
When you say these people, are you speaking about Jungian analysts?
some analysts and some where Jung has quite often said that he doesn't think that his psychology is being what's the word? Getting into the world via psychology. He thinks that maybe religion or literature or artists or people who are not using it with their intellect, he felt were the better mediators.
I've heard you say something similar.
Yeah, than the psychiatrist. But I mean that we have very, very good analysts. Not everybody is that devoted and that deep, and we just have to see which way it goes. I think one has to be aware of that possibility that it could water down into something else. And to me, something vital would be lost that way.
What do you think of the projections that Jung had to carry in his lifetime?
Well, he made actually a remark about that too when I asked him what to do with the projections I have to carry, which is always the wise old woman. And I mean, I carried that when I was 30. I had no idea how to carry it. And he was, I mean, that as generous as he was, he kind of compared himself with me at that time and said, look, you will always get that projection. I always get the projection of the old wise man. And what you have to watch is that you don't get abused. He said, then I get so angry if I get abused that I really am afraid of what I could do. And so he advised me to say, or to behave, that if somebody abuses me, he used the word, you let him or her dangle.
Dangle?
Dangle. Mm-hmm. And then they will stop abusing you. That's too painful. And he was, in that respect, absolutely unsentimental. Or, if you want to, understanding. He didn't want to understand. Because he felt that it doesn't do them any favor by understanding. He felt then they stay with that psychology and don't ever change.
But there must be a lot of pain in carrying a lot of negative projections as well as positive projections.
Well, we just read in our Nietzsche seminar that he felt always he could deal with negative projections if they were set into his face. And if you knew where you were and you were not consciously being told how wonderful you are, and then you hear all stories. And of course Jung heard the same stories that I hear, behind your back, of what they don't like and so on. So I think the woman carries more by nature than the man does. I don't think that he was as involved in that as I at times am, and as hurt by it as I at times am.
And you think that's because of his nature?
It's because he's a man.
Because he's a man.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He could let it go. And actually that's much better, because then the others have to carry it rather than that I carry it. But he always said, even with positive, like with a positive transference, knowing that you have to have a positive transference, he always said how wonderful it is if that doesn't happen. If it's just an ordinary relationship, not positive and not negative, but an ordinary human relationship. And so, to me that's the same. The positive transference is just as difficult as a negative one. Because you know you are not what is projected, and you know one time, hopefully, it gets withdrawn in a way that the other person gets the benefit of it, but you are never sure that that's going to happen.
Did you ever work with Tony Wolff? I don't think I've ever asked you that.
Yes, I worked just as long with Tony Wolff as I worked with Jung. And she worked, of course, very differently, being a woman. She was more personal than Jung was, though you never felt that he wasn't. I don't know how he did that. And actually, I had once a great difficulty with him, and she was the one who mediated between us. So I'm always very grateful to her.
Could one ask what kind of a difficulty?
No, that is too personal. But she did it. I mean, it was just Jung's anima who was, when that came through, I think Feuerweg talked about it, he could be so cruel and so irrational. I was not able to deal with that. So she mediated that. Which I really have never forgotten her, because there are not many analysts who would do that. They would simply say, you do it. But I guess she knew him very well, and she knew how difficult it is with him when he was in that emotional outbursting anima, and you didn't know what hit you. And I think that's the difference between any male and any female analyst. I mean, the woman can become animus, but that's not as shocking, I think, as when the anima comes through.
You talked before about things being spoken behind the back of an analyst, and that how you hear things, or how Jung heard things. Was he very affected by his relationship with Tony Wolff and what people talked about?
No, I didn't have the feeling at all. Probably in the beginning, when he had himself his own doubts about it, which I'm sure he had. But that was later such an established relationship, and Mrs. Jung was so included, that I am very sure he would not have parked his car in front of Tony Wolff's house, who was 1 minute away from the Institute, and everybody would know when he was there and when he was not there, if he would have had the slightest doubts about it himself. Mm-hmm.
She looked very delicate. I don't know whether she was, but she looked
was
very patrician, aristocratic.
She was living in the house of her ancestors. When you came into the house, and every wall was one enormous painting of her ancestors. And she was that little woman, living there all by herself as a maid. No, she had sisters, but she didn't live with her. They were married, and I think she died really because she had very little function in Jung's life anymore. She did not go, as far as I know, she did not go with him into alchemy. That's where Malus von Franz came in. And that was not at all a love relationship. It was a sore, mystical relationship. And I think she had nothing to live for.
So she got left behind in a sense.
No, that was much sadder to everybody. Well, of course, the people, the women who worked with Jung in Zurich couldn't stand Toni Wolff because they were much too jealous. They all wanted to be at her place.
That's a question I wanted to ask you. Who was her friend?
She made some close relationships with some people who worked with her, but not many. Maya was very close to her, and that was a blessing. You really had the feeling that analysis is something that you can't learn. You know, that it is a guru-disciple relationship, and then it either happens or it doesn't happen.
Well, then he saw it as an art and not as a scientific learning step by step.
No, he made a point of saying, when I said, why did you think I can be an analyst? Because he put that, he arranged that to happen. I didn't ego-wise ask for it ever. And so he asked this man to pastor me till I say yes. And that's how I became an analyst. He was an analyst at that time. So my first patient was a Jungian analyst.
If you could change the way the training is done, would you do it that way, Hilde? Meaning, would you just have people begin when you...
No, I really have seen that training program is very helpful to people. I'm glad I didn't have to go through it, but I think it's very helpful. I don't think I would have gone through it. I would not have become an analyst.
Do you think they would have accepted you in the training program, Hilde?
No,
I don't either.
Not with, certainly not. I still say I would never pass the examination here. They start, what type are you, and what type is this, and, I was working with Jung, Maya, Toni Wolff, and Liliane Frey, and each one said, Jung said, I have not written the types to type anybody. And everybody else said, Jung has not written the types to type anybody. I have written it to show how the libido runs between different types. And I refuse even to make an assumption what type you are. And I'm still at that, I have just very difficult time even to type myself. Now here, if you don't, it's a question in the certifying board. If you make an application, the first question is, what type are you? And if those poor people don't know what type they are, then that's already a terrible thing against them, How unconscious can you be that you don't know what type you are? Well, I have not the faintest idea what I am.
What you're saying, in a way, is a little frightening.
Why?
Well, if someone like yourself couldn't get into the training program today or wouldn't know what type you were, then what is going to happen to Jungian psychology in the spirit of what Jung had?
That's what I am. You see, the emphasis is on practical experience and all the psychological ways that are different than Jung. And I don't know why that is so important in the Jungian training. I have nothing against all the other psychologies. I have something against Jungians doing them. I think there is something very individual about being a Jungian, and only a Jungian can relate this to a patient. Now, all the other psychologies can be related by anybody else. The knowledge that we need is mythology and comparative religion and the training program does, from my feeling, not give enough information about Buddhism and Taoism and Islam, any other religion, to understand the dreams.
Did you get this yourself, this understanding of these various religions, or did you get this from your work with Jung? Were you a spiritual child who...
No, not at all.
No.
Well, I will not say that. I was, as long as I remember, I was enormously impressed by any picture of the crucifixion of Christ. And but that's the only thing that I can say. I cannot remember dreams, other than, what. Obviously, the unconscious was breaking in. I had a lot of dreams of robbers and things that were breaking into the house, but they were absolutely meaningless to me. Always, I never even mentioned them in my analysis as a root for all this. But my parents took us to almost every museum when we were on vacation, Munich or all the places where the most beautiful museums are, and I would stand before a Christ image and not go anywhere else. I was absolutely struck by that. And that played an enormous role in my own analysis and dreams. It came up again and again.
You once said that your mother was a rather unusual woman for her time. And I agree with you.
I don't even know how unusual she was. I can only say that looking back, I didn't think that, when she was alive. But of course, she had no college because no woman went to college. And she had enormous knowledge of everything that I would say today we need for being a Jungian analyst. And highly cultured woman who painted and played the piano and did just everything, but was, according to what one saw, she was a housewife. But a very unusual one. And they have already, my parents have already gone on vacations with our children or even on vacations by themselves at a time when it was absolutely unheard of that one does it. So I said, when I came to Jung, I said I can't do Freudian analysis because my childhood was just lovely. And I have nothing to complain.
Sounds like you had a good preparation for becoming a Jungian analyst, really.
But he laughed when he heard that.
When you worked with Jung, did he use active imagination in the sense of encouraging you to paint or draw or anything?
No, he didn't encourage you ever. You had to do all that yourself.
Did you do that?
Oh, yes.
Do you still do it?
I worked every day, 8 hours at least, on one dream. And that included the painting, the reading up of the material, the writing about it, the analysis and the interpretation. And that's the way you came to Jung, you see. Because he was not bothering with that. He was just then adding what he had to say.
What did that intense introversion produce in you?
From what I can see, I had much less analysis than most of the people I know in terms of years. But apparently it just really, when I was there for 3 months, I lived a lifetime of becoming conscious. And that's why I've always advised this to people, not necessarily to go to Zurich, but I have some patients, even here in LA, who leave home, go into a motel, and then come every day, shall we say, for 4 weeks, and then what we call the Zurich experience happened in Los Angeles. And that was a big eye-opener, because I had projected that all on Zurich and their analysts. And then I realized it can happen anywhere where anybody is just concentrated working on the unconscious. I mean, that also means that you are taken away from personal problems, husband, children, friends, and it is what Jung called it, a artificial psychosis. That you get that deep into the unconscious, and you felt at times completely psychotic, completely cut off from the world. But I think it was worth it. I had very hard time to do active imagination. Partly when I did, it was so enormously powerful and had such far-reaching results that I was really scared of it. And I came one day to him and I said, I was sitting up all night and nothing came. And I said, I give myself one more night, and if nothing comes, I commit suicide. And he looked at me and he said, oh, I can understand that. I know exactly how you feel. You see, he doesn't say, oh, don't do that, or what have you. And then he told me a story of his own active imagination, which I think happened when he left Freud and when he started his own journey. And he went with what he called a psychopampus, who was getting him too fast, too high up. And he suddenly realized if he goes one step further, he's on top of the mountain, that all that's left is to fall into the abyss. And he got scared. And he said, I suddenly remembered I am in an active imagination. And so I imagined that psychopampus to be that small. And I put him into my pocket. And I went back. And he said, that saved my sanity. Otherwise, I probably would have become insane at that time. And so that was a story he told me when I was saying that. Well, as you can see, the next night, obviously, I could do an active imagination. I'm still here. But I really meant it. It was a most unbelievable torture not to be able to let the unconscious come through.
Suicide, the whole idea of it brings up the subject of death.
I just read a letter in his second volume where apparently a woman asked him about suicide, and apparently she was very ill and had terrible pains, and she asked him if it would be permissible to do that, and he wrote her a most compassionate letter back. I mean, you felt how he felt with her, but at the same time he said, where he stands, suicide is not admitted. He feels that if the psyche is not ready that one can die, then one has to stand whatever comes, so that the psyche can still produce whatever it has to produce. But that's his point of view, and he hopes that she can make her own decision, whatever decision she's going to make, that she will have his compassion and not his judgment. And what is a very touching letter.
What about your thoughts about your own death?
I'm not thinking of it. I have really... that's another thing that he writes. As long as one is alive, you have to think of life. And I have not the faintest idea how to think about it. So I guess when it comes to it, then it will be there. I have seen how enormously difficult it is to go through a transformation, what we also call death and rebirth, and how tremendously difficult it is to accept the death, and how we always try to get to the birth before we have experienced the death. And so I think it must be really a very painful experience from that. I can only deduct that. Because I think when you go through a transformation, you have to assume also that you are ready to go through that transformation. But I find it enormously hard to let go whatever one has to let go. And without that, you have no transformation. I think a mother experiences probably mostly with her children, and I must say that every time, and that still goes on, even though my children are grown up and completely independent, whenever a new letting go takes place, it's just as painful as the first one.
One of the things that impressed me about Jung's book, Memories, Dreams, was, I remember on the back cover it said something to the effect that he had come to an age where he didn't know anything. In a sense, that he had come to that place where... Do you feel that you're in that kind of a place?
Oh yes, I think the older you become, the more you know that you don't know. I think that's probably a general experience, I assume. And I'm always very much surprised when people come with that very determined attitude, as if they do know. And I have to admit, I feel it's a very young person that feels that way. Particularly in our analytical psychology, you have so many areas where you can see black or white, or black and white, or any other color, and you do need the reaction of the patient that it is really meaningful. And so if you think you know, you take that reaction away.
Would you think that that would be a shadow of the analyst?
Could be. Could be. I don't think it's just a shadow of the analyst. There are lots of people who feel that way, but in the analytical relationship it's more dangerous to be that way. And it's also very difficult because you hear a dream and you have certain knowledge of the dream material that the patient doesn't have, of where you sometimes make the immediate interpretation of the dream without even asking one association. Now, Jung has done that many times, but you see, you did work on the dream before you came, and he kind of assumed that's what you do. So you didn't leave it all up to him. But you know, there's one story that comes to my mind where he had a woman patient the first time, and he asked her all the things we asked, you know, tell me about your history, and you're married. And so she was apparently a very proper woman. And so she said, yes, I'm married, and I have 4 children. And Jung already smelled something. And when she said, I have 4 children, he said, well, any cow can do that. Now, you see, that was not a general answer of his, but it was very good for that woman who was so in the mother archetype that he wanted to tell her any cow can do that. And then Jung asked, and did you ever have a boyfriend? And she said, I'm not that kind of a woman. And Jung looked at her and said, if you never had a boyfriend, you have no business to say that, because you don't know how it is. And I mean, this is the way he worked, you see. Just in the first hour. I don't know if that woman ever came back. My idea is that she probably never came back. But that's okay, because he didn't want to go through all that years of analysis till she gets there. No, I think that's a beautiful way of relating.
In his own way, by today's standards, Jung would have been a very unconventional Jungian analyst.
Yes, absolutely.
That if you had something that you could say to the future, not to the present, but to the future, about intuitions that you've had about contemporary life or whatever, is there anything that you would want to pass on to those people that are coming, the future generation, that you haven't through your
the only thing I can say for the future is please become conscious, because everything else is dependent on that. If we are unconscious, the most horrible things can come, we won't even know it. Like a Watergate thing. That's an example of how the unconscious can creep in and do the most horrible things nobody knows about it. That's really all I'm concerned about.